My name is Margaret Gallagher.
And your maiden name?
And my maiden name was Jeffries.
Okay.
Margaret Jeffries.
Fantastic. And can you tell me a little bit about the Jeffries family?
Well, yes, my grandfather, my dad's father, Joseph G. Jeffries was his name. Yes, that's my grandpa Jeffries, my dad's father.
And when do we think this picture was taken?
I just don't know.
Probably about the 1885, you think?
Yeah, I would imagine about that.
Okay.
Because he died in '89. Civil War veteran. I have his discharge papers from the Civil War. And he's buried at Mount Calvary Cemetery in Leavenworth. And he was a guard at the state prison when he died, but he died from injuries caused by the war. So he left his wife and quite a few children, several. And 3 of them, and my dad was 4 years old. They were just real small. So my grandmother got a pension and she was able to keep a home for them. But the man that came back to represent his section of the army, came back again to visit my little Irish grandmother. My grandmother came from Ireland when she was 16, and that's when that was taken, supposedly.
This picture?
Yes, this is my grandma's, and her name was Smith here, but it's Grandma Jeffries, my dad's mother. It came from Ireland, and she was born in 1850, and she died in 1935. And she was 16 years old when she came over here by herself. She came from Ireland when she was 17. And they married, and they lived over 50 years together at Fairmount, which Susie said was part of our community. It's about 12 miles, I guess. You know where it is, up toward Leavenworth. So they had a very good life. His name was John Smith. So I never knew my grandfather. See, my dad was only 4 years old when he died. So Grandpa Smith became our grandpa. And he was awfully good, a good man, and helped her raise her children. And they lived at Fairmount. Now, Grandma used to come down here and visit us, but she never moved from the house where she lived when the kids were little. And Fairmount just gradually disappeared. It's just a wide place in the road. Yes, my dad was born in Fredonia, Kansas. I'm sure they lived in the country because they told about, for a while, they lived in their covered wagon. And they must have moved to Lansing along about 1887, I would just guess. And then my dad was 4 years old when his father died in 1889. My dad's name was Robert Benjamin Jeffries, and everybody called him Ben. So that's what he was known by. And he was a farmer. That's my dad, Robert Benjamin Jeffries. He was born August 24th, 1885. We moved to Tonganoxie in 1919. He rented a farm out on extended 4th Street, right on out. Mount the First. Well, if you know where Junior Black lives, it's the next place, down the hill. And that's what he farmed. And I remember they moved stuff on a hay frame and a wagon, him and the hired man. And my mother and my sister and I came on the train. It was too far, to ride in the wagon, we thought. I guess. And my grandmother fixed us a basket of food to have when we got here. I remember the day we moved, but I remember something before that. My dad made arrangements to rent that farm out there, and the man that owned it, his name was Newdwarf, and he lived in Kansas City. So we were to meet here in Tonganoxie, my dad and him, to make the arrangements to rent the place, And Dad and I came on the train, and he brought me with him when I was 5 years old. And we walked up the main street. Now, I remember that a little bit. And the McKeon Hotel was right across the alley from Richard Smith's office. It was a tall building. It was there until, I guess they tore it down when they made the new stuff there. I can't remember what year they tore it down. But lots of people remember the McKeon Hotel. Mr. McKeon sat out in front in a rocking chair under a shade tree. Anytime he went up the street, that was Ben McKeon. He was sitting out there. But anyway, in the front of it, they had a little restaurant. Now, it was the first time I've been where they serve food, And it was quite a treat, I'll tell you. And Dad and Mr. Newdorf talked. And Mr. Newdorf had came out in his car, so we go ride out to the farm, and I just waited while they looked around the place, you know, and then the 1st of March in 1919 we moved there. And we were there several years, and then we moved to a farm south of, well, I went to to Edminster School. And then I still went to Edminster School when we lived south of it. But anyway, I loved the school out there. I went there 6 years.
Tell me what this picture is.
Yes, this is Edminster School, out on Old 40 Highway, about 3 miles. And the teacher in the middle of the back row there was Mary Lloyd, and she married Chauncey Angel. And Jack Angel is her grandson. And I could name them all. I'm right in front of the teacher, the little girl in the plaid dress. And the little boy next to me on the other side is Sam Ward. His dad was a county commissioner. And this little girl right here is still living, Mary Alice. She was Mary Alice Lenahan, and she married Stubbs. Her name now is Mary Alice Stubbs. And I don't know what else you might like to know about them.
Is your sister in there? Is your sister in the picture?
Yes, this is my sister. And these two girls were sisters. This is Sam Lichty's sister. This boy's name was Penfold.
About this picture?
Yes, now this is Hazel Ridge School again, but this is a Sunday school class that they used to have. And this is my husband, Harry. And this woman's name was Ollie Randall, and she was never married, I don't think. And this is Hollingsworth. But now I don't think I'll know anyone else. But that was the Hazel Ridge Sunday School.
And it was about 1914.
I would say about 1912. A pretty good guess, because he's about as big as he was in the school. My mother was Sarah Jane Allen. Is that right? And Allen was her last name. And she was born down at Loring, Kansas, which is near Bonner Springs, you know. She went to Loring School a year or two. And her mother died when she was just real young. She didn't remember her mother at all. But her dad her mother had 7 children. She was 32 years old. And they all had pneumonia, and when she got pneumonia, so he didn't live, you know. Well, then he took care of the children, or what care they had. She said the oldest children were twins, and they were 13, so they kind of took over the housekeeping and took care of them. And in 1903, they were living in this house down close to the river. And the river was a terrible, terrible flood, you know. And she said the water was coming up, they could see it, and Grandpa Allen had gone somewhere to do something, and he didn't come back, and the kids were so frightened, you know. And finally a neighbor came by, and he told him, you know, he better go home. And he did, and she said by the time they got loaded up in the lumber wagon, the water was up on the wheels of the wagon as they were going out, and they lost everything they had. He lost his farm equipment, and they went to Fairmount, to Starnes's, and that was a relative of Grandpa Allen, and they made a place for him, you know, and then they rented a house there. And that's where my mother met my dad. She went to school at Fairmount, I think, about 1 year, but she was pretty young. I think she was just like 15 or 16. But they were married in November of 1904. And they lived in Topeka. My dad was worked on a streetcar. And he liked that, I guess, but he still wanted to go back to the farm, you know, so they went to Fairmount, and we lived on my farm belonged to Grandpa Smith. But that's where we moved to Tonganoxie from. But my mother told the story about that flood. She said they left their sewing machine. And then the Starnes boys, later years, told me about going back down with their dad and Grandpa Allen to look about his farm machinery, you know. And they said it was just covered, what was there, just covered with sand from the river, you know, and the house, everything was gone. They just had to start from scratch. And of course, by that time, the kids were big enough, some of them were married, and so... But anyway, I always thought that was interesting, how they got out of that flood.
Can you tell me about this picture?
Yes, this was a little house that we lived in at Fairmount. And that's where I was born. And this is my grandfather had a milk route. My dad hauled one load. This other man, I don't know who that is, had another load of milk. I suppose they had empty cans on there then. And this is my dad's mother, Sarah Smith. And this is Grandpa Smith. And this little guy, little fella, his name was John Myers. His mother had died. This was his grandma too. And so he pretty much stayed with Grandma.
And who's on the wagon?
Well, that's my dad on the wagon.
And now this picture?
Well, it's just some cattle that we had before at Fairmount. It was taken at Fairmount. That's really about all I know about it. I might not even have been born yet.
So you were born when?
December 29th, 1912, at Fairmount, Kansas. And the doctor came out from Baser, which is about 3 miles away, you know. And I have my birth certificate. I don't know when they started, you know, recording them, but anyway, when I wrote, they sent it right on back, so it was on file. And I have lots of memories of Fairmount. The train went through there, the same one that went through the Pacific, you know, that went through here. And, of course, Grandma's house, going there a whole lot. And then when I started the school at Fairmount, the hired man used to tell my dad, I'm going to walk the little one to school, then I'll be right back. I can remember that, and Mama would laugh. She thought that was so funny. He'd walk me to school because I walked down this road quite a little ways. I always had a long walk to school, but maybe that was good. Anyway, I loved it after we come to Tonga because the school was nice. And Mary Lloyd was my teacher, and she's the grandmother of Jack Angel. But my sister, she was born in 1906. She was born in Topeka before they came back here, before they came back to Fairmount. Yes, this is my sister Edith, and she was 6 years old, 6.5 years old, and I was 6 months old. And it was taken in Leavenworth. My mother always went to this same place to get a picture. And she was in the 7th grade, and I was just started to school that year. But we went to Edminster School, and the mailman used to pick us up, let us ride. He had 2 horses, you know, and we either sit in the back or up on the seat with him. And he's an old gentleman, you know. It was Fount Huffman, and some of his family's still here, you know. But anyway, we liked him with him. But my sister told him the first day, now, I'm Edith, and this is Margaret, and we're going to go to Edminster School. Everything was fine. Then the next morning, get in. But he called us Effie and Mabel. And you know now, I laughed because my sister was smart as could be. I don't know whether she ever caught on or not. He was just doing that to tease us, see, because she'd tell him, no, now my name's Edith, and she's Margaret. But we was always Effie and Mabel. And I know he wouldn't have forgotten every day. But I think now the mailman wouldn't dare pick up somebody they'd be in trouble. But those were, I guess, good old days. Then when we moved south, though, then I had to walk by myself usually. I didn't mind walking, but I loved someone to walk with me. But I had several teachers out there that were, well, they were all just nice as could be. And then we moved north of town to a farm. And I went to Friendship Valley School. This is Friendship Valley School, and this would have been in 1926. And this is Helen Freeman, the teacher. And she later married Overgard. And this is me. That's Dolly Freeman. That's her sister. And I know them all. I mean, I can remember them. Because I was pretty good size then. Clarence Korb is in there, right back there. And Clarence Mills. And this is Pearl Korb, and this is Ruth Korb. There were several of them. That was Helen Freeman was a teacher out there, and she was really nice. I thought so much of her. But then when I was 2 weeks into the 8th grade, we moved into town. And my dad worked at different things. He had a milk route to the, you know, the story was in the Mirror about that. Well, he had a milk route to the Franklin. He'd run all up around Jar Below. I'd go with him a whole lot, and I knew all the names, and And he was such a friendly person. He got to stop and talk to each one of them. And if they needed help, he could always stop and help them out too, you know. He loved ever so often. I remember one time we went out here in the country, my mother and Dad and I, and stayed 2 weeks, just nights. And Dad would milk at night, and then he'd milk the next morning, then we'd come back to town for the day, so these people could take a vacation. So he enjoyed every minute of it, being a farmer again. The house is still, there's a house there, but it's not the same one because it burned, the house that we lived in. And Ray Cronemeyer, Jack was a baby then, lived right across the road, just almost straight across. We enjoyed having neighbors that good, close, you know.
Tell me about this commencement address.
Yes, this is when my sister graduated from grade school in 1920, and I see she gave the class prophecy. I really don't remember, but I'm sure I was there.
Okay, when did you move to town then?
Well, 1926. And I went to grade school here, finished 8th grade, and then graduated. I graduated in May of 26. It must have been 25, because I graduated from 8th grade in May of 26, and high school in 1930. So that's when it was.
And which house did you move into?
Well, it's on Pleasant Street, and across from where Dr. Stevens lives, a 2-story house. The man that had the depot agent, Ralph Mills, and he was awfully nice. They were nice people. And his wife, they had lived there before. They moved to a farm out by Edminster. And when the section crews would come in without a cook or something, you know, his wife or someone helped her, I guess, would fix the food for him. So he asked Mama if she wanted to do that, and of course she did. Now, everybody, that times were beginning to get a little tight, you know. So a lot of times she would fix the meal for them, maybe fix their lunches for the next day. Some people working on the railroad. And Mr. Mills would always call her first and tell her, you know, how many there would be and all about it. So that was kind of interesting.
What do you remember about Tonganoxie, the town, when you first moved here?
What was that?
What do you remember about the town when you first moved here?
Well, my mother and I thought it was just terrible going to have to live in town. You know, we always lived in the country, and I just roam around the pasture or wherever. But we hadn't been here 2 weeks till we were really town people. Most of us just thought this was great, you know. So we liked living in town. And my mother, she was a worker. She worked at the restaurant, and part of her deal for working, when I would come down from school and eat my lunch, and my dad came in off the milk route about 12 o'clock or 12:30, and he would get his dinner. That was part of her working. And she worked for Papenhausen's restaurant, and it was where I told you that my Keene Hotel was. It was right next door to that. They both were torn down to make that empty lot. Is it still it's an empty lot?
Mm-hmm. I think
Yeah,
so.
I'm picturing it now. It's hard for me. I see the people the way it used to be, but that don't work. But things were, well, of course we had the movie theater, and that was wonderful. When we lived out in the country, sometimes my dad would get the wagon and we'd come to town on Saturday night. We had a car though, but it wasn't too faithful, and he didn't know one thing about it. We just laughed, because if we came to town in the car, we might have it stopped and going home, you know. My dad never raised the hood to look. I think he just took it out, and we'd all get a package because we'd get our groceries, you know. Go down the road walking, and the next morning he'd take a team of horses and go get the car. And that's the way we did it. But he never claimed to know very much about them, but he did sell cars, and he was a good salesman. You know, I used to laugh about how he... Well, part of that deal of staying out in the country there, the people bought the car to take the vacations. He worked in a lot of deals that way, but he was a good salesman.
Did you work when you were going to high school?
Yes, Art Roberts was a night watchman. He stayed up on the street all night. The merchants paid him, and they paid him like $2 a month a piece, you know, which mounted up to living wages in those days. And they had 4 boys, 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah. And the littlest boy had a little problem. He was real sweet, and but I think I carried him 2 or 3 miles. But I would go down and help Mrs. Roberts, right across the alley from where we lived up here. In the meantime, we had moved up on 3rd Street. And I'd help her before I went to school. And then after school, I'd go there and help her again. Just mostly took care of Joseph. And so she could rest. And Art was an awful good person, awful good provider. But something funny about it, instead of the merchants always paying him, it was better for them if he took it in trade. So she would make a list and go to Ed Hoskins at a grocery store, go to Ed Hoskins and get this and this and this, and that'll be so much. And then you go down to another grocery store. We had Henry's at a store up here, Ed Hoskins. There was a John's Market on the other side of the street, and then there was always Elders. And but one time, Guides had one where the Evans Real Estate is a grocery store. I had this list, and I go one to the other, and I'd still have my sack, but I would pick up what she needed, and the merchants didn't have to spend the money. But we laughed at Art. He did stay up there and watch the places, and they were good people.
Where else did you work?
Well, I worked at the Mars Hotel in the 1930 and 31 when we were married in July, but the earlier part of that year, I worked over there and just waited tables. I'd come at 7 o'clock and help her, Mrs. Myers, get everything started. Every morning of the world she made slaw and potato salad. That was the 2 dishes they always had. Then she would cook everything, and real good. And so many of the people from uptown came down and ate at noon, And then if there was anything going on in the evening, while we worked on the evening. But the dining room, there was 2 dining rooms. And we had our junior and senior prom over there. I don't remember anymore who served it. Maybe they did themselves. But anyway, that was real interesting.
Can you tell me about when you were baptized?
Yes, I was baptized in 1926, and Stella Strauss married Bill Valentine. We were baptized together, and she passed away just a year or so ago. She was several years older than me. But I enjoyed the church, and all through high school I taught a Sunday school class, and I had a lot of little ones, and I was working a little bit, but not making very much. So I remember Christmas, this lady, and she lived, Mrs. Ramsey. She loved the church, but she was like me, not too able to go all the time. And so one day she called me and says, "Come down, I want to give you $1 to help buy some little gifts for Christmas for the kids, And I think I had 17. And the church wasn't very big either. But I pick up 2 or 3 of them walking up there, and take them with me. One of the little girls, Betty Redding? Okay, she was in my Sunday school class. When they had something out at the church, they asked the teachers that had been teachers, to stand. Well, Betty kept poking me, get up. I did, but it was so long ago, nobody remembered, They had the pool hall, and the pool hall was where Dr. Ritchie's office is. And on Thursday nights before the football game on Friday, we'd have a rally. And we'd just meet at the school. It wasn't out there, of course. It was up here. And we'd all get together. And then we'd come downtown holding hands, and we'd run down the main street back and forth before the stores closed, And Mr. Johnson was real interested in sports. And I don't think they had any children. And anyway, when we'd go run around through the pool tables, I'm sure that was disturbing, but they were very nice to us, Then when everybody'd run out the door, he'd give them a candy bar. A whole candy bar, which was great those days. But I always think about them. And I have a little trinket that she gave me, or she didn't give me, she gave it to the lady, and the lady gave it to me. A little cup and saucer. That was Mrs. Johnson's. I'm real proud of that. And her uncle, Frank Baird, lived with them. And where they lived was where the bank has that little deal out there by Phillips 66 station. Their house sat right there. Yeah, but they were real nice people. What I always think about how he put up with us going in there and, you know, disturbing his business, but he didn't care a bit. He had the spirit too.
Your sister?
Yes, my sister was born in Topeka, and she went to high school. She went to grade school at Fairmount and at Edminster, and then finished up in Tonga. My mother thought, because she was going to be in high school the next year, she'd go to the 8th grade in Tonganoxie and get acquainted, you know. So she did. And we had to pay, they had to pay tuition. I think they paid $3 a month, which was a lot of money then. But it was worth that for her to come to town school. Because we were in that other district. But anyway, she taught school 1 year at Sarcoxie, which down by Linwood, you know. Oh, it's not there anymore, but anyway, I gave pictures and stuff of that I had to her grandchildren. They never saw her, she never saw them, but they're still her grandchildren, 2 little girls. And my nephew, she married Stanley Jones in 1924 in the fall, in September. She graduated from high school in May, and that first year she taught the year of school. And then he done heavy construction work, you know, worked on big machines. My husband said he was the best person to operate machines he ever knew. And he worked on that kind of stuff too a lot, you know. But anyway, they just had this one boy, Raymond. He was born in 26, and he died in 54, and left 2 little girls. They were 2 and 5, and we keep in close touch, but the one that was 5 died this past. My husband was Harry Gallagher, and he was Harry Sr., I guess, because we had a son, Harry. We have a son, Harry Jr., and we just simply knew each other. If we met, we always stopped to talk a minute, and then just all at once, we went out to Art Hempel's. He was having a house dance. People had dances at their homes, you know, and he had invited us. And I remember when we got out there, he said, "Now, you're just welcome. This is Art's house." Art Hempel was an awful nice person, and so was Cecil, his wife. But anyway, then from then on, we just seemed like we were together all the time and started making plans. And we were married in July of 31. And we have 4 boys. Are you ready? Okay, our oldest son was Harry Jr., and he lives in Jefferson City. He's 74. And then the second son was Robert Allen, and he is 72. And then Larry Patrick, he is 69. And my son Jim passed away in 1982. And he was born in 42. He was 40 when he passed away. He was born in this house and had his 40th birthday in this house. And then in August of that year, we lost him. And I have lots of grandchildren, and oh, they are precious. Yes, my husband, Harry, was born June the 7th, 1907. And he was born out here on a farm, about 2.5 miles northwest of town, in the Hazel Ridge community, because that's where he went to school, his brothers. Yes, this is Hazel Ridge School out northwest of town. And this is the entire school, and the teacher back here, must be this one back here. And her name was Tina Zimmerman. Now, I don't know her, but Harry said that. And this is my husband, Harry, and the picture was taken in 1912. He was in the 1st grade. This is his brother, Marvin, and this is his sister, Mary. And now they're all named on the back. Harry named them for me, and I wrote them on the back. He knew them, most all of them. And his dad had built this had bought this land, and of course there wasn't a lot of money left, so he built this little 4-room house. And they all lived in it and were real happy. And his mother was a hard worker. Her name was Louisa Fetty, and they were German descent. Her parents had lived in Lawrence. And the Gallaghers, well, Clifford and his grandfather's name was Clifford Gallagher, and his grandmother was Julia. And his grandfather died years and years ago. Now I've got the dates, but right offhand I don't know. And she managed by herself, and well, two of her daughters never married, and so they lived at home with her, and she lived up into her 90s. And then Harry's dad lived with us his last years, you know, about 10 years he was with us, after his wife died, because he lived alone quite a little while and then kept the farm, you know, and stayed on. One of the boys was there with him, but then when he got married, they left him all alone. But he passed away right there in our bedroom in his sleep. But he was a real little Irishman, you know. But now, something about Harry's grandmother and grandfather, Julia and Clifford Gallagher, they came over, both came over from Ireland, and they met on a boat, and they both were named Gallagher.
Can you tell me about these pictures?
Okay, now these are Harry's grandparents, his dad's mother and father. They both came from Ireland, and they were both named Gallagher. I think I told you that before. This is Clifford Gallagher, was his name, and she was Julia Gallagher, their last name. But they were no relation and never knew each other, you know. But I always thought that was kind of strange, that both of their last names would be Gallagher. But now they're buried over at Hogue Cemetery, over in the Baser area, you know. And Aunt Julia and Aunt Nellie were the ones that were left, the girls that didn't. Well, Aunt Nellie was married, but her husband had died. She had one son, and he died, so she was all alone. So she moved back in with her mother. But they were all workers.
Can you tell me when the Gallagher family came to Tonganoxie?
Well, I would just assume that it was in the 1880s, from the things that I've heard, and I probably should know. You know, it would be so simple for Harry. But Harry's dad was Patrick William Gallagher. Sure. Yeah, this is Harry's dad, Pat Gallagher. Harry's dad was born the 19th of March in 1960.
1860.
1860, I'm sorry.
In Leavenworth.
In Leavenworth, that's right. Because he showed us the house one day where they lived at the time that he was born. But I don't think they were in Leavenworth, but just a short time. I don't know what they were doing there. Because he was a farmer, and she farmed after he was gone. Grandpa used to tell us, I say Grandpa when I'm talking about Harry's dad, because that's what the kids called him, you know. But he told a story about his mother, Julia. Said she looked like she was pretty stable. But anyway, she went out to her barn one morning to start her chores, you know, do the work. And there was guys in the barn, and it was a James brother. She grabbed a pitchfork and they run. They just left, you know. She had no encounter with them. But she knew that's who it was, or at least she thought it was. But he used to tell that. And something else that Harry's dad used to tell the kids, he sang a song about Quantrill trade on Lawrence. See, he was born pretty small, but he heard them talk about it. And he told how women, seemed like they were killing the men, you know, or just getting rid of them. So the woman wrapped a bed tick around this guy and let him down in the well. Just an empty well, I guess. But anyway, the kids would just be fascinated, you know, they liked that. But he sang a little song about Quantrill. He went to burn Lawrence just over the line. He could do it real good. Yes, this is my husband's family. They had, the mother, Louisa, and Patrick had 9 children. They were so proud. They all grew up to be adults, you know. And I'll start over here. This is Clifford. Nellie, Marvin, and Mary. Mary married Merle Ridgway, and he was the son of the guy up on the Ratliff's building, you know. That was Will Ridgway on the dray wagon. Yeah, that's who she married, his son. This is Tom Gallagher. He was the oldest of the children. And this is my husband, Harry Gallagher. He was the youngest of the children. And this is Chris. He joined the Navy. It was in 1909, so he was quite a lot older than Harry. This is Walter, and this is Bert. Bert was worked for the city here for years after he retired, came to town.
Great. Can you tell us about where you and your husband Harry lived here in Tonganoxie?
Yes, the first place we lived, the house belonged to his brother Bert and his wife, and it's over right across from the historical, on the highway, right on the corner there. Now that's where our oldest son, where we lived when he was born. He was born in the hospital. The second one was born right there in that house. And then we moved, a friend of Harry's had a farm out, well, if you know where Yates's station was, and where they lived, right up that hill, and there's a new house there now, I think. But we lived there for a while. Then we came back to town and we rented a house on 3rd Street, right up this way. And we lived just second door to my mother, which was real nice. If you wanted to run off for a little bit, you know, I'll be right back. I'll leave the kids. So that was nice. Yes, that's the house that my mother lived in, and this is where she died. And it's on 3rd Street, just past the grade school, about a block. There's an old picture, you can tell by the way she's dressed. But she was awful happy about her little home. It's after she was alone. And we were there until Harry was doing something down to Mill, and Jimmy Farrell, he'd been gone a long time. But he heard Harry say something about, we just had a 3-room house, you know, and we were getting more of us all the time. He said that this house was for sale. And I think it was $900 they wanted for it. And Harry, oh, that sounds awful good, but we didn't have any money. It was $900. So anyway, Jimmy, it helped. And then we were able to pay him off in about 3 years. And oh, we thought we really had something. But it was a place to live with more room. And Harry, it was painted. It wasn't painted. It hadn't been for years. It was old black and pinkish color. And I said, oh, Harry, I wish it was white. He said, well, it'll be white before we move into it. And he come down after work and with his paintbrush, and he laughed about the lady that laid here. She was resting in on the bed, and she talked to him out the window. So he visited with her while he painted. But it worked out just great. He painted white. Oh, we thought it was beautiful. And his brother and his little girl came over to help us, you know, move. And oh, she thought, she was in the 7th grade. And she thought that would just be wonderful. They're right next to the swimming pool. So the next summer, the boys Harry went to school from here, started. We lived right by the school, but when he was ready to go to school, we moved down here. But he went on, and that summer, oh, they had to go swimming, you know. So they did. They was both able to have season tickets. Harry's cost $2.50, and Bob's cost $1 for the season. Now imagine that one. But it was great, and they learned to swim. Harry was swimming in about 2 weeks. But Bob had to stay in the little pool, so he didn't learn that quick. But we enjoyed the swimming pool. Every year they had to have season tickets because we were so close. One little friend would go by and come on and go swimming with me. And then another one. So they had to be ready so they could go.
Tell me about what it was like when the Depression came.
Yes, I can tell you about the bank holiday. I read something about that the other day. And there was some people lived across. We lived in the Bert's house where I was telling you. And the people lived across the street from us. And he had a business. What he did was had this big old enormous truck. This little business, they had all these dead animals, you know, and he made pretty good money. And we would often go with him and stay in the truck, you know, just to get out and take a ride. They were nice to us. But anyway, they had money, and they put it in the bank, and they put it in the bank. And we always, little bit we had, we just kept it at home because we didn't have from live to hand mouth, you know. And when the banks, things closed, they couldn't get money out for nothing. And so they came over, we were able to loan them a little bit. You know, just a few dollars. $1 was just wonderful, you know. It wasn't like it is now. But it's so hard for me to, just like this expense with my water, you know. Sitting down and write the check $200. It hurts. Mm-hmm. But it's nothing like it was then. You know, there is money to work with. And we're so lucky.
Now, did that impact your other family and friends?
Oh, everybody suffered, I think, or a lot of people did. Anyone that had a steady job was okay, but jobs were so scarce. But my husband, he would just work at most anything that, even on a Sunday, him and another guy cleaned out a well, I think it was. Oh, it was a miserable job. But you did what you could get to get money, And he did all right. We got by real good. And he was when he was working at Fort Leavenworth, and there was quite a few from here that worked there and they had no way to go. So this one year it was really tight, and Harry was going to school. So anyway, he said, gather up as much money as you can. I'm going to do something here. He bought a truck, and he worked and he worked. He took canvas and made a cover over it. Got a little coal oil stove and put back there and put benches in it. Took them into Leavenworth. They all rode with him, and they were working some kind of a rock quarry. And I think he had about maybe 17 or so. They paid whatever. When they got paid, they'd pay him for their ride, And man, he come out all right. He got the truck paid for. But he had lots of ideas, And some of them I was afraid, But I shouldn't have been afraid because, I think now he had some good ideas. And he could use them. He always wanted a farm, and he had a farm. And he always wanted to pick up, and he had a pickup. We used to laugh when the last one he had was a yellow pickup. And this friend of mine said, he just looks like a teenager buzzing around that pickup. I said, well, that's what he's supposed to do.
Can you tell me about you remember about the swimming pool?
Yes, we lived out north of town, and my dad was awful fond of horses and stuff. And they were digging it with scoops and horses, So when he came to town to get something, sometimes they had to have a plowshare sharpened or something, we never went by the pool without stopping. And we walk up there and watch them a while, It was just fascinating. That must have been about 1925 or 6. Then when I was in the 8th grade, and when we'd come to town, we'd go swimming in the pool. And then my kids, we have really enjoyed it. It's been a wonderful thing. But I think about how we helped watch them dig it. And I think it was just a group of men invested, and it was a good deal. But now during the wartime, they closed the pool because they couldn't get the disinfectant, for the water and stuff. And they used it for a trailer park, and people lived there when they were building a highway out here, too. I guess that's what the job was. There were 3 or 4 trailers parked over there, and I guess the city had gave them permission, They had to have someplace to live. And then when the buildings fell uptown in 57, 4th of July in 57, the 3rd of July, the town was under martial law. And they had soldiers from Fort Leavenworth, they stayed over there around the pool and patrolled the streets because I guess it was just something that was necessary.
Can you tell me about your boys that went in the service, what their names were and what they did?
Yes. Harry Jr. went to the service in June after he graduated in May, went to the Air Force. He was gone 4 years. He was 32 months in Germany, and we was awful happy to see him come home. And then the next 2 years after that, when Bob graduated, he joined and left for the Air Force in September. And he spent quite a bit of time in Japan. And that was interesting, too. But that's another one. We're glad to see him come home. And then Larry was in the Army, and he went to Fort Leonard Wood and spent his... And then after, when he was ready to get out, I forget what happened, something deal, They put 3 months. They either had to stay another 3 months or join the reserve. And so he went ahead and stayed the 3 months and be done with that. But now Harry, in his Air Force deal, stayed in the reserve, and man, he wound up having to go back to where they were, Berlin Wall. They called him back, but he got out then as soon as he could because he had a family and needed to be at home.
Can you tell me some stories about the livery barn here?
Well, yes, it was there when we came, and of course we always had the fear that it might get on fire, you know, because it looked pretty dried out. Yes, this is the old livery barn that belonged to Mr. Hamilton, and the house that you see there is the house we're in right now doing the video. And the horses and buggies were the ones he rented out to people, and we redid the house several times, but it's the same old house. And this was taken about 1910, I was told. But everything was fine. It was a faithful old barn, and it was used for a lot of different things. Now, Dale Rawlings had the, when we came here, Dale Rawlings had it. I think that's right. There was a garage there, though, at one time. It must have been before Dale. But anyway, the majority of the time, it belonged to Dale Rawlings. And at one time, this did too. It was all together. So anyway, they separated it because I think Dale wanted to sell the house to some relative, and he did. And then it was long before we bought it. But they dressed, when Dale had it, he had women, and men too, in there dressing chickens. And they would take orders from the big companies in Kansas City that were going to give their employees dressed fowl, you know, for Christmas or holidays. And oh my, they dress them early and late. And it would look like it'd be such a miserable job, you know, picking those feathers off and that scalding. They just scald them and pick them and get them ready to go. But I'm sure they did a good job. And then, well, there was different things in there, nothing very much. Larry had it for a little while and just had odds and ends in there. And then a woman had it that had Avon stuff. All I ever seen her do was washing. She'd get the bottles from somewhere and washing them up. And I don't know whether she could sell them or not, but that's what she was intending to do. And then Mr. Trebe came, and I don't know what he did. But, you know, he handled the tents, that was one thing. You know, rented them out and everything. But the old barn was pretty faithful. I missed it, you know, but I can see uptown pretty good, so that's good. And it's nice to have the outdoors. This is my grandfather Alan, my mother's father. And he lived with us. He lived to be about 84 years old. And he died in 1921.
Tell me about these pictures.
Yes, this is my mother, Sarah Jeffries. And late picture, too. And now this is my family. My son Bob, Jim, myself, Larry, and my husband, Harry. And down here is my nephew, Raymond Jones, is a tall one. And this is Harry, my son, and this is Bob. And they've been to Sunday school.
Can you tell me about these pictures?
Yes, this is my sister, the taller one, and myself. And that was when we still lived at Fairmount. And this is my dad. Looks like he's relaxing. And Tobe Carter. Now, I think a lot of people remember Tobe Carter because he was a great guy around town. And Grandpa, and I don't know, Fred Cox took the picture, it says. I guess he just saw him sitting there visiting. But this is Harry's dad.
Tell me about the ladies in the hat.
Yes, now this is Harry's mother, my husband's mother, Louisa Gallagher. And this is Mary Wickersham. And they were sisters, but the hats are what's cute, I think. Now you want me to do the rest of them?
Sure.
Okay. This is my grandson, Scott Gallagher, and this is Kevin. And this is Julie, that's a granddaughter. And she's holding a little great-granddaughter, Meg. And this is my son, Bob, and his daughter, Carolyn, and another daughter, Tina. And this is my mother and her real close friend, Mrs. Stone King, Ina Stone King. They're old-timers in Tongi, too.